This is the new PRS S2 Studio, and it's the ultimate mid guitar. Among younger crowds, the word mid has become something of an insult because it describes something that is in the middle, hence mid. But it actually shouldn't be an insult. In fact, mid can be a huge compliment. After all, it's the best part of an Oreo, sandwiches, movie trilogies. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, PRS has three main price tiers. SE guitars are at the bottom, core models are at the top, and the S2 line is somewhere in the middle. SE guitars are made overseas, and then we have the core and the S2 models, which are both built in the same Maryland factory in the US. So the quality of the S2 line is amazing, but in terms of its price, it's in the middle, mid. Now, this S2 Studio has PRS's narrow-filled DD pickups. They're not traditional humbuckers, they're not single coils, they're in the middle, mid. And as we go through the rest of this review, you're going to see that mid theme continue. But here's the thing, something in the middle often makes for the best option for the most people. So in this video, I'm going to share everything about the S2 Studio, but I'm also going to compare it to a few other PRS guitars so you can see exactly where the S2 Studio fits into the whole lineup. Our main points of comparison are going to be the PRS Standard 24 Satin, a humbucker-equipped core model, and the PRS DG2, the discontinued but best single-coil guitar PRS ever made. Yes, I know the Silver Sky is supposed to hold that crown, but the Silver Sky is a PRS take on a Strat, just like the McCarty 594 is a PRS take on a Les Paul. The EG2 is a real PRS that happens to have single-coil pickups. And by the end of this video, you'll have a clear idea of what this guitar is and whether or not it will fit your needs. Starting from the headstock, we have the classic PRS design and the PRS Phase 3 locking tuners, which are fantastic. These are not found on the SE line, but they are on the core models and the S2s. The nut came from the factory cut properly, and we have straight string pull from the nut to the tuners, which means fewer tuning issues and a smoother tremolo use. My formative years were spent watching various Bam Margera projects, so my favorite color is also purple, and I love how the headstock is purple to match the body. But it's not actually the exact same shade of purple, which is interesting. It's different. We can see the Paul Reed Smith logo in gold is very elegant, and on the back of the headstock you'll find the serial number written by hand, just like on PRS core models. And as we move to the neck, we get back to our theme of mid. The S2 Studio is a mahogany neck with the PRS pattern regular neck shape and a gloss finish. It's not as thin as their pattern thin, not as thick as the Y fat, it's somewhere in the middle, mid. The standard 24 Satin has a pattern thin neck, and these feel closer to the modern C that most guitar companies offer nowadays. And the McCarty 594 is definitely a much chunkier neck. So again, the S2 Studio is somewhere in the middle. It's definitely larger than average, but it's not crazy like the Miles Kennedy signature guitar. That neck was humongous. Back to the front, we have a rosewood fingerboard and the iconic bird inlays, which still somehow managed to be elegant instead of feeling flashy, at least in my opinion. You'll notice that these are not the super ornate birds that we get on the core model guitars like the standard 24 Satin, but I do like this cream color quite a bit. It matches the tuners and the pickup rings, and it gives the whole guitar a nice cohesion. Then we have 22 nickel frets, 25-inch scale length, and we're going to talk a lot more about scale length a bit later. But to wrap up the neck discussion, and this will shock no one, but the fretwork is perfect. There are no sharp fret edges, there are no dead spots, the leveling is great. PRS always knocks it out of the park, and this guitar is no exception. High fret access is also solid thanks to the PRS heel joint, and also this nice carve on the front of the lower horn. So you can really get your hand way up here without having any inhibition. By the way, if you're into this kind of deep dive review, or you want to chat guitar philosophy, guitar lessons, and advice, check out the Lifelong Guitarist Newsletter link below. It's free and delivered to your inbox every Saturday morning for players who want to keep growing. Now the body of this guitar has a nice shape, size, and design. It's not as chunky as a Gibson Les Paul or a McCarty 594, but it's not as thin as, say, an Ibanez S series. It's somewhere in the middle, mid. I actually preferred this design over the more expensive and fancy standard 24 Satin. The standard 24 Satin has this beautiful violin carve, which is also comfortable, but there is a slight upturned angle which presses on your right arm a bit as you play. It's certainly not a deal breaker. After all, this is the literal definition of a violin carve, and it's clearly stated. But the S2 doesn't have that. Instead, we have a moderate forearm bevel, which I find extremely comfortable. So it's not totally flat like a Tele, and it's also not extreme like a custom-made headless guitar. In other words, the forearm bevel is somewhere in the middle. It's mid. There's also a very generous belly cut, which adds to the overall comfort when this guitar is against your body. I really love this shade of purple. It looks a bit like those pictures of different galaxies, and the color changes a bit depending on how the light hits it. PRS is of course known for their really beautiful woods, especially on the core models and the 10 tops. And of course, every S2 guitar is going to look a little bit different, but you will notice that this line in general has a bit more of a subdued wood top. You definitely see some wood grain, but you wouldn't mistake this for some of the fancier stuff PRS has to offer. So now we move to the pickups, and there is a lot to discuss here. I would say most guitar players spend most of their time on the bridge pickup. It tends to be the more popular go-to tone. But I'm a neck pickup connoisseur, and I believe there's actually more significant variations for these pickups. In my mind, there are two iconic neck pickup tones, and if we ignore the tone width debate, those two iconic tones are impacted by three main factors: pickup type, humbucker, P90, single coil, whatever, scale length, and the number of frets on the guitar. The bigger the pickup, the fatter the tone. The lower the scale length, the warmer the tone. And the less frets the guitar has, the darker the tone is going to be. So for example, you take a Gibson Les Paul, 24.75 inch scale length, P90 or humbucker pickups, 22 frets. That is going to be a super warm, fat, dark tone. In fact, it's so warm and so dark that if you add a fuzz pedal or a tube screamer, it can get a bit muddy and lack cut in a mix. Then we have Fender Stratocasters, single coils, 25.5 inch scale length, and that tone is much brighter, sharper, and cuts a bit more. Now, if you wanted the most versatile neck pickup possible, you would try something in the middle, mid. And that's exactly what the S2 Studio does. We have a 25 inch scale length and these DD narrow frill pickups. And if you compare the standard 24, the C2, and this S2 Studio, especially on the same amp settings, you'll hear that the S2 is pretty much exactly in the middle. Kind of like a P90, but a bit smoother and without the hum, since this has two coils that cancel the hum out. But here's the really cool thing. Because these pickups and this scale length is right in between those two iconic tones, it can be easily manipulated to get either thing. If you add a tube screamer to the chain with the drive on low, it fattens up enough to pass for a full-size humbucker. But if you go on a cleaner setting, raise your trebles a bit, it can pass for a noiseless single coil. So if you want the most versatile neck pickup tone, something in the middle is a good fit. like it is on this guitar. And I really think that going with 22 frets here instead of 24 really helps to give it that slight edge and versatility. And since we have 3 pickups, we also get the very quacky and convincing strat tones in positions 2 and 4. Then we turn to the bridge where we can go full humbucker to get that classic bridge sound. But in true PRS fashion, we of course can coil split, and the coil split tone is very convincing. So now we also get a nice telly sound as well. And the middle pickup by itself is not a very common guitar tone, but it does sound good too. Of course, the volume and the tone knobs turn very smoothly, and the 5-way switch is also extra clicky. And this is a small detail, but I really like the tip that PRS uses on the 5-way switch. It's a little bit larger and just easier to hit in the heat of the moment. Finally, we have the PRS tremolo, and at this point, it's also iconic. It's extremely smooth and reliable. The tuning stability is phenomenal, but you still get that vintage aesthetic. A couple years back, I reviewed a bunch of SC guitars, and I said something that felt bold at the time. I said the SC line was getting so good, it might cannibalize the S2 series. My buddy Matthew Dale even speculated that PRS might be planning to cancel the S2 line altogether and just go SE and Core. Well, now the S2s are so good, they might just replace the Core line for most players. Because the S2 Studio is mid in the best way possible. Mid like The Dark Knight or Godfather Part 2. Mid like the center of the Venn diagram. You're getting the best tones from a Strat and a Les Paul while getting the best features and build quality from PRS. After all, the S2 and the Cores are built in the exact same US factory by the same people with the same parts but for a lower price. Of course, if you want the more ornate birds, more figured tops, then the Core models are there. And you can climb all the way up to the 10 top or private stock if that's your aesthetic preference and you have the budget. But if you're a working guitarist, a serious home player, or just someone who wants the smartest balance of quality and value, maybe you can't afford 2 or 3 high-end instruments, then this guitar might be the one for you because it's right in the middle.